on this computer and recording. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Laughter for All podcast. I am Comedian Nazareth, and this is our episode 51. And I told you guys this is about being funny, but since the pandemic started, I started inviting people, experts that will help your life, and help you with your ministry, help you with your church, and help you with your life. So today I'm so excited to invite a friend of mine. And you know what? If you say comedians, what makes you laugh? When every morning I go to Instagram and I watch Phil Cooke's Instagram and I laugh hard. Literally, I laugh hard. And he's the only one I actually go back and respond to the jokes that he does. So according to CNN journalist Paul Azan, Phil is rare, a working producer in Hollywood with a PhD in theology. He produced TV and film programming in more than 60 countries around the world, and all of them have COVID now. And in the process, been shot at, listen to this, he's been shot at, survived 2 military coups, fallen out of helicopter, and in Africa been threatened with prison. And during that time, through his company, Cooke Media Group in LA, he's helped some of the largest Christian and nonprofit organizations in the world use the media to tell their story in a changing, disrupted culture. Phil was executive producer of Let Hope Rise, the Hillsong movie, released to theaters nationwide, and producer of The Insanity of God, a feature documentary premiered nationally at Fathom events. He's appeared on NBC, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and his work has been profiled in New York Times, LA Times, the Wall Street Journal. His book, Jolt, Get the Jump on the World That Constantly Changing, shares his secrets of making today's culture of disruption and change work with. He's been on, he spoke at Yale, at Berkeley, UCLA, Aurora University. And you go, how can someone like that put all this together and be on this MSNBC and Berkeley and Huffington Post and Fast Company and Forbes Magazine and Wired and Fox News? Because this man has something to offer all of us. And in February, BC, which is before coronavirus, he was speaking at the NRB, the National Religious Broadcaster, and he was talking about, once you listen to him, you're going to remember what he said. And the 2 points I remember from him right now is, number one, if you're a creative person, of course, when you have creative people in your team, number one, give him deadlines and give him room to work. So welcome, Phil. Thank you for being on the...
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to go back to your opening line, which was, we normally have funny people on the podcast, but since COVID, we've had other experts, which means people who aren't so funny. So I guess that's why I've been invited today. Is that right?
No. You are funny. I said, and that's why I clarified it with, you're the only one that makes me laugh with Instagram. So, but the whole idea is like, we started getting off trying to be just funny to trying to get people to help people. People are scared. How has COVID impacted your industry, Phil?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I've been busier than ever, because when they shut down churches across the country, suddenly pastors were asking, how in the world do I take my service online? And so our company, Cooke Media Group, works helping Christians essentially not stink at the media. We've been very, very busy helping churches all over the country kind of upgrade their live stream to another level. It's funny, I'm in my office in my home right now in Burbank, and I can look out over the valley and see Walt Disney Studios, Warner Brothers Studios, Universal Studios, Nickelodeon, the Cartoon Network, and they're all ghost towns. For the last 6 months, nothing has been going on over there. They are just completely empty, which means in the last 6 months, Christians like you and the churches across this country have produced more media than Hollywood has. So it's an interesting turn of events that's happened in the last 6 months.
Now, I want to get back to stinks, the Christian media used to stink. But before that, where were you born, Phil?
North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina.
And when did you move to LA?
I graduated from high school in Charlotte, moved to college in Oklahoma, went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I was just there.
Stayed on there for 6 or 8 years, and then moved to LA in 91, actually.
And did you know you wanted to become a producer? You wanted to work in Hollywood? Did you know that?
You know what? It's really funny. When I was in high school, I had a group of friends, and we took my dad's Super 8 film camera back in those days, and we made little short movies. and we made army movies and, you know, frogman movies and mafia movies and space movies. And it never crossed my mind you could actually do that for a living. I mean, we know it was just fun. And I took my films to college thinking maybe there'll be guys there that want to make movies with me. And a guy literally across the hall, when I was unpacking my first day in college, one of my films fell out of my suitcase. And this guy said, "Hey, I'm taking a film class. I can show you how to edit those little movies." And so he took me down one night and we're working on my little film, and a professor there, a film professor, was working on a project really late. And he came up to me and introduced himself and said, "You know, I've been watching you edit your little film here." And he said, "I've got guys that have been taking film class for 3 years that don't do this well." He said, "Would you mind if I showed your movie in my class tomorrow?" And this is my first week of school. And I said, "Sure, if I could come in and sit on the back row." So the next day they showed my little movie. I sat on the back row to watch. And when it was over, people talked about it. And this thought hit me like a ton of bricks. It may be the greatest revelation I've ever had, that if I can do something with a camera that makes people talk like this, that's what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I literally changed my major that day, and I've never looked back since.
Now, were you a believer? Of course, you went to Oral Roberts, so you were a Christian before finishing high school?
Yeah, my dad was a pastor in North Carolina. My dad was a pastor. So I grew up behind the scenes in church. I mowed the cemetery. I did filled the communion cups. People thought we had bells in our steeple, but it was me climbing up and playing 33 RPM album of church bells. And so, yeah, I've been behind the scenes in church all my life, my whole life.
So you became, so you finished school, you moved to LA, you became a filmmaker, or should I say a producer, or what would be the title that you would appreciate in your field, in the film industry?
You know what? I end up being a producer more than anything else. We also consult a lot, like I say, churches, ministry organizations, nonprofits. We did all the media for the Museum of the Bible that led up to their opening. We've done projects for the Salvation Army. We've done major studio things as well, but my sweet spot, what I really want to help is how Christians share their story with the world. And so that's really the focus of what we do.
Now, you mentioned you started going, of course, you were broke for a while, but you went to 60 countries, and one of them says you fell off a helicopter. Now, I'm a comedian. I just watched Narcos. I was binge watching Narcos with Pablo Escobar, and I shouldn't, because I go to bed with this, gun. It's not good. So I'm not promoting the show or Netflix. But what I'm saying is, like, you fell off a helicopter. How did that happen?
Well, I was filming a project in Jamaica, of all places, and this was very early in my career. And it was a big live event in the National Stadium in Jamaica, in Kingston. And about halfway through the day, I realized it was going to be an evening event. And I thought, man, if I could cover this from the air, if I could get an aerial shot of this, and this is before drones, this is back when you had to use helicopters. And I made a bunch of calls, and there was no helicopter on the island that was outfitted to shoot, that was you could film from. And so I learned that the Red Stripe Beer Company owned a helicopter, and it was a Bell Jet Ranger, an amazing helicopter. So I went racing across the island, went into their headquarters, and actually talked my way in and got them to give me their helicopter for an hour. And it wasn't rigged for filming, so we took the door off, and I literally sat on the side of the helicopter with my feet hanging out on the little runner bar down there. And the pilot tied me in with a rope. And I had, back in those days, it was early in my career, back in those days, cameras were pretty big. And so I had the camera, and I was tied in with a rope and just hanging out of the helicopter. And we took off and went over Kingston Bay. He turned really sharp to go over Kingston Bay towards the stadium. And we didn't notice that he had left a loop in the rope that nobody saw. And so I literally slid right out of the helicopter, just right out. And I'll tell you, it'll get you right with God. Moments like that will get you right with God. Although all I could think of was keep the shot in focus. Just keep the shot.
You are a filmmaker.
Literally dangling by a rope underneath his helicopter, and he saw it, and he was a really good pilot, and he jerked it back really hard, and it literally slung me back into the helicopter. Had he jerked it any harder, I'd have probably gone up into the blades, but that wouldn't have been pretty. But he jerked me back into the helicopter, and I retied my rope really tight. And then we went on and got the shot, and it was an amazing shot to get. So all in all, it was worth it, but it was a pretty scary experience at the time.
It's funny. I listened to your book, Unique. That's one of the. I really recommend everyone who's even thinking a pastor or a creative person to be able to listen to it. And one of the things I remember is you were at a checkpoint because I'm Middle Eastern. I know TSA, and you were in
Right.
some kind of South America, and they would not let your equipment in, and the only card you have is a membership to a
A
free
magazine.
yeah,
Well,
American film.
back in those days, we had a magazine here in Hollywood called the American Film. It was called American Film, and it was sponsored by a nonprofit called the American Film Institute. And when you subscribed to the magazine, they gave you an official membership card into the American Film Institute, which is nothing but a magazine subscription. And I was in Brazil, actually, in Manaus, Brazil, and we had tried and tried and tried to get our equipment in the country. 2-3 days went by. The customs official wouldn't budge, and he wanted proof that I was an American filmmaker. You know, we don't exactly carry a license around, and he wanted proof, and he just would not budge. And so finally, one night, I think the third night I was there, I'm emptying my pockets before I go to bed. I'm so frustrated. I'm thinking I'm going to have to go home, and I went through my wallet just to be sure, and lo and behold, I saw that membership card in the American Film Institute. And I walked in the next day and I said, "You want proof I'm an American filmmaker? Look at this." And I plopped my magazine subscription card down. And he looked at it. "Oh my gosh, the American Film Institute? Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Cooke. Let me see what we can do to help." And I had a police escort to the airport. It was amazing. So it's amazing what the right magazine subscription at the right time can do for you.
Now you were shot at, and I'm saying that because that tells me you are serious about filmmaking. You're serious about your job. It's not like, oh, because some people say, because I have a son who since he was 7 was doing the same thing you're doing. He wanted just to make movie. So I know the passion. But who shot at you? Was it drug dealers or is it a cartel?
Well,
What is it?
my wife has done it a couple times, but we don't talk about that.
Kathleen, she's
Yeah,
awesome.
Kathleen she's a good shot.
Yeah.
No, we were in Lagos, Nigeria. We were filming there during a couple of their military coups they had in the country. And we just went through a couple checkpoints where they didn't like what we had to offer. And we were in the middle of a kind of a go, no-go zone where, you know, we probably shouldn't have been there, but I was trying to get this shot to really capture the experience of what it was like being in the middle of a military coup. And suddenly we started getting shot at. So we pulled back pretty quickly. And it's an interesting experience. You know, everybody talks about going out and doing documentary work, but particularly what I like about doing Christian projects is Christians go to the most remote places on the planet. I mean, we filmed India, we filmed Mongolia, we filmed China. We've been all over the place in extremely remote places. And it's great stories for your grandkids, but it's not the safest thing in the world if you're concerned about your safety. No
And
question.
the reason I've been asking this because you are a top professional now. Why does most, I emphasize the word, most Christian films and projects stink? Why?
Because we're concerned about the message and not so concerned about how we deliver the message.
Mm.
You know, we're so worried that we want to get this message of the gospel across to people. What we don't understand is long before they hear the message, they have to buy into your movie or your comedy routine or your book, whatever it is you do. They have to buy into it long before they buy your message. And so we need to spend more time making sure, you know, I tell young filmmakers like your son, when they come to Hollywood, don't lead with your faith. Don't come to Hollywood and say, you know, God called me here to change the industry or God called me here to do great movies. I always say, don't lead with your faith, lead with your talent. You know, when you impress them, when you show people you're a brilliant actor or a writer or director or producer, you know what? You impress them with that, they'll listen to anything you have to say. And so I always think lead with your talent, let people know that you're capable, you're good, you're qualified, then worry about getting the message in later. And that's always, always more effective. So I think Christians, you know, we're coming along. I mean, there are plenty of non-Christians that make terrible movies too, but I just think that we've tried so hard to get the message right that we haven't paid attention to how we deliver that message. And by the way, it's important to know that we live in an 8-second world. A study came out a couple of years ago that said, when you meet somebody today, you decide what you think of that person within the first 4 to 8 seconds. Now think about it. That means we haven't really talked to them. We don't really know much about them, but we live in this culture that's so distracted. We got our iPhones going off. We got email to check. We got text messages. We got so many things to do that we've actually changed our behavior to where we make decisions about stuff we don't really know about yet. And so that simply means I tell pastors, I'm glad your sermon's anointed. I'm glad your worship is fantastic. But in an 8-second world, what's the parking lot like? What's the lobby of your church like? Who's the first person a new visitor meets when they walk in the door? Because people are making those decisions within the first 8 to 10 seconds. And so we just need to think about that whenever we create programs, movies, anything we do. We need to think that capturing people's attention is the most important thing we could possibly do.
That's awesome. Now, I want to switch to something real quick and come back to the point. Some people think, oh, well, Phil Cooke is great if you're a creative person, but you have this understanding that everyone is creative in their own way. So tell us about that.
Well, you're exactly right. Whenever I speak at a conference or event, I always have people that will tell me, Phil, I'm just not really creative. I decided to be an accountant or an insurance salesman or a real estate salesman, and I'm not very creative. The truth is, we're all born creative. Get a bunch of toddlers together in a room and turn them loose. They're all wildly creative. What we've discovered is, though, about age 6, people start losing their creativity. Now, it's interesting to me that about the time we start school, people start getting less creative. What is it about our education system in this country that makes us start to lose our creativity? But the truth is, there's no research whatsoever that some people are born creative and some people aren't. We are all born creative. Some of us decide to stop using that muscle. And so we just need to start thinking in different ways. I'm a big proponent of, you want to juice up your creativity a little bit, drive home from work a different way, go to the grocery store a different way, change the way you dress, change the way you look, change your house around a little bit, start thinking about different ways to look at things. And suddenly ideas will start sparking. For me, the shower. Where do you get your best jokes? I get my best ideas in the shower. I don't know about you, but that water hits me, the ideas start coming. Where do you get yours?
At the bank, when I see my bank account, I gotta start being funny. But no, you're right. Mine happens maybe right before I go to bed, like late,
Really?
almost tomorrow, where my brain is going into a different stage. That's where.
Well,
but sometimes you're just looking at life.
I've discovered 2 big things. If people are watching this right now, 2 big things that will really help. One is know what time of day you're the most creative. You've heard of circadian rhythm. We all live and we have a clock in our system that goes up and down all day long. And so there's certain times of day we're really alert, really creative, and certain times of day we're not. And I learned early on that from 6 a.m. to noon, I'm a madman. I can write, I can do anything. I can really focus on creative stuff beautifully in the morning. But after about noon, after lunch, I'm pretty worthless for the rest of the day. I can take phone calls, I can work in the office, I can go to meetings. But as far as real creative work, it's got to be between 6 a.m. and noon. Occasionally it'll be different, but it's almost always that way. And so what time of day is important? Some people are morning, some people are night. My wife's a night person. There's a small sliver of people that are afternoon people. But the second thing is, where are you most creative? I've discovered that I can't have a TV on, I can't be playing music, I can't have the windows open. A bank vault would probably be the best place for me because I have to be isolated for me to really think clearly about creative ideas. There's some research that indicates the dull roar of a coffee shop conversation stimulates some people. So everybody's a little different. So if you could find out what time of day you're creative and kind of start to block that off as much as possible, and then start creating an environment where you can be creative. Do you like music? Do you not like music? Would it help to have the TV on or not? Figure all that out. And boy, I'll tell you, your creativity will start really going through the roof.
You're right. To me, like you said, if I don't write before 11 in the morning, I'm done. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to sit and write at 2 or 3 or at night. It's the morning for me, and it's always like you. I'm in my office quiet. I don't want to be interrupted. Now, let me go. Excuse my ADD. How do you stay hip? You look hip. You always look hip. Every time I saw you, you're always styling and hip. How do you, is this is this something that subconscious happens to you, or you already, okay, this is what I'm going to look. This is the look now. This is how I stay.
So the complete question is, how do you stay hip for an old guy? That's the real question.
No, not for an old guy. There's no old people anymore.
I'm not offended much.
No, I didn't say that. You have hair. You'll never be old. You have hair.
Well, first of all, I don't think like it. I just think young. In fact, it's funny. I'll be in meetings with clients and I'll be the oldest guy in the room, but I don't think of myself that way. I just think of myself, I'll defer to younger guys, even if I know their ideas are stupid and will never work. I'll defer to younger people just because I don't think of myself as an old guy. So I think it's a frame of mind. I think it's really important that you just think. And here's the thing, when we get older, whether you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s or however old somebody may be listening, I think it's important that we tend to get stuck. We like certain kinds of music. We like certain kinds of TV shows or certain kind of books or magazines, and we tend to get stuck in those. But the truth is, if you want to be creative or you still want to be relevant in your life, whatever you do, you need to constantly be exposing yourself to new things. My wife, Kathleen, and I travel a lot, and it's mostly for business. But I mean, I traveled 250,000 miles last year, and we were in about 11 different countries around the world. And that really opens my eyes up to different ways of doing things, seeing how different cultures work. And so anything you can do to constantly be experiencing new things, reading new books, doing things differently it actually really does make a difference. And I also like to surround myself with people younger than me. They challenge me, they make me think. I have 2 younger daughters who aren't afraid to tell me I'm an idiot. I think that helps. So really thinking younger is important as people start to age. I think it's really critical.
Now, on your Instagram, and that would lead me to the question, how to maximize your influence, which is your new book that's coming out. Your Instagram, where did you get those pictures?
All over.
All over.
Sometimes pastors will send them to me and say, hey, Phil, I'm a pastor. I can't post this, but you can. Here you go. You know what? I teach social media a lot with my classes and things that I'm teaching. And I teach a lot about how to use Instagram. And it's really actually all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything, TikTok nowadays, are all platforms to help you take your career to the next level. They can help you get your message out there in a big way. However, when it comes to Instagram, for me, I just I play with it. I just have fun with it. I just enjoy it. And I have a group of, 10, 12,000 people that follow me that really enjoy it. And so we just have a big time. And, it's funny. I'll post things that are meant to be lighthearted or funny. And I have people that take it so seriously. There are people, Instagram is not the place, or Twitter or Facebook are not the places to have a in-depth conversation about a major cultural issue. That's just not the place. It's much more lighthearted, short, inspirational moments. And I wish people could lighten up a little bit and have a little more fun sometimes. Some people just don't get it.
Yes, and I see you sometimes, like you do 5 funny days, and then boom, you throw a point of view that's your political view or something. Then you go back to the funny.
That's even probably too much. I probably should back off the political posts a little bit, because I do think that I want to appeal to a wider section of people. That's a great point. And but I just think what you're passionate about, talk about. The single biggest, this is a good tidbit. The single greatest reason people follow you on social media is they want to know what it's like to be you. So in your case, sharing about your show, you're great at sharing about your shows, behind the scenes, talking about jokes that you're trying to work out, struggling to try to figure out what my routine is going to be, all this kind of things, travel situations, being on planes. People love that because they really want to see a glimpse of what your life is like. So anybody watching this, I'll tell you, if you stop just putting up inspirational sayings or just kind of news items and stuff, show people a little bit about what your life is like, and they'll really respond. And I think that's important for people to remember, that social media is social, and you need to go back and forth and engage with people and talk to them. It makes a big difference.
Okay, let's say I'm a fan watching right now, listening right now, and I'm in early 40s, and I want to take the 3 highlights from your class on social media. What do you, I know you already gave about the one about, talk about your life. Let's say I'm a boring pastor in a Midwest.
There's a few of those I've met.
Yeah. What do you tell them?
I would say one important thing is use your social media to help take your career to the next level. Sure, you can post about your family. Sure, you can post funny stuff. Sure, you can, show personal things. But if you want to establish your expertise in a certain area, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it on social media. For instance, Jerry Seinfeld, people don't realize what a historian of comedy Jerry Seinfeld is. I've seen him on talk shows where he would go back and talk about comedians in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and he has an incredible insight. he can share that on social media and people really respond. So whatever your expertise is, if you're a pastor, if you're a real estate agent, if you're a coach, if you're a comedian, whatever you do, let's start focusing your social media on one big thing that you want to be known for. The second thing I would say is reflect that in your social media bio and your picture. I had a guy came to me recently and said, I want to be known as a social media expert. I want to be a consultant for social media. And I looked at his platforms, and his Twitter photo was a picture of a kitten. And I thought, hey, what does a kitten have to do with you being a social media expert? Come on. Your picture is incredibly important. Your bio is incredibly important, because all those things feed that perception of what you want people to know about you. So if you're trying to position yourself as the best high school football coach in the nation, your post should be about that. Your picture, your bio, all those things should really, really focus on that. If you can do that, great. And maybe the third thing I would say is respond to people. I had a pastor one time that would post things on social media and then never go back and respond to the people who had said something about his post. And so I talked him into it one day, and he went, the first person, some lady responded to a post of his, the very first person that responded, he went back and said something to her. Immediately, she came back with, oh my gosh, my pastor talks to me on social media. This is the most amazing church I've ever seen. People love it when you talk back to them. So don't just go through and post something and walk away. Engage with people. Have a little conversation. I have friends that have, hundreds of thousands of followers, and they actually will take the time 2 or 3 times a day. They don't just post and walk away. They clear about 20 minutes of their time. So they'll post, and then they'll wait about 20 minutes and start responding to some people as they respond to them. So that conversational nature of social media is really a key to getting more and more and more followers.
So pastors, big churches shouldn't hire a staff person to respond to the text. They
They
should do it
do.
themselves.
You can almost always tell it's not fake. It's just not the guy. If it was the pastor or a woman, a man, a woman, whoever, whatever leader you are, it's always better if you can respond yourself to these things. Certainly if you have a big staff and you've got social media directors, they can respond for you. But the truth is, most of your post, I would just encourage you to consider having it come from you, because it's much more real and it shows the authentic life that you're living, and people want to engage with that.
Tell us about your book, Maximize Your Influence. So what is that? What's the main points about that book?
The main point is we live in a digital world. I'll tell you, this COVID-19 thing has showed us that churches all over the world, 6 months ago, from recording this 6 months ago, they all shut down. And up to that point, Lifeway Research did a study that 41% of churches in the United States had never offered anything to their people online. No resources, no services, no music, no nothing. And so suddenly when churches shut down all over the world, pastors realized that those people watching online are a legitimate congregation. And so rather than just putting up a camera in the balcony or something and showing them what happens in church, pastors started having to really focus on that camera, because for the first time, 100% of their congregation was on the other side of that camera. So I started thinking about that. I'd been writing the book for a couple of years before that. And, this digital revolution has changed everything. It's changed the way we speak. It's changed the way we lead teams. In the book, I talk about how to lead creative teams, because if you're going anywhere in your career, you need to have a creative team around you, whether it's full-time or part-time or volunteers. There's so many aspects. I talk about social media. I talk about even crisis communication. And, we live in a world today where we have to live transparent lives. With the power of social media, you just can't hide anything anymore. It used to be leaders, particularly politicians, and even some church leaders could have affairs. They could have, steal money. They could do all kind of stuff and nobody would know. Well, guess what? I had a pastor one time pull me aside and say, Phil, it would probably be best if you didn't tell my congregation about my yacht. And I said, well, you're an idiot. For one thing, with Google, they can download the title of the yacht. And with Google Earth, they can download a photo of the boat sitting at the dock. So we really can't hide stuff anymore. And we have to understand how that works. And so the book just really, if you're a leader, if you want to be a leader, my book, Maximize Your Influence, talks about how digital media impacts every aspect of what you do. Today, you really can't be a leader without any intimate knowledge of communication, media. We just live in that world where we're in a media-driven culture. And so the book really covers all the aspects of what you need to understand as a pastor, as a leader, to really engage the community around you.
When is that coming out?
That comes out in September. Actually, you can go to influencematters.com, and we have a nonprofit called the Influence Lab that funds us going internationally to train leaders, Christian leaders worldwide, and how to use the media more effectively. And right now you can pre-order it at influencematters.com and be the first in line to get it. I'll even sign the book for you. And you can go there and get it. And it should be here about the first or second week of September. That's what the publisher's telling us.
We'll make sure that we talk about that again at the end when we give the information. But right now, I was thinking, if you're a pastor, for example, should you have, TikTok and should have Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all that? Or should you focus on one or two? What should you do? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. That's a great question. And what I've discovered is you don't feel like you have to run this rat race of be involved with everything. I don't do TikTok, for instance. Maybe I'll do it in the future, but I don't do TikTok. But I focus on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are the three I focus on. And really, even if you want to focus one, some leaders are concerned they don't want to get involved in social media, and that's okay. But I would encourage you to dip your toe in and experiment with it and find the platforms. Now, here's the thing to understand. Different people follow different platforms. A good example is Twitter. Twitter is where leaders are. So if you want to reach Rick Warren or Erwin McManus or other people, Twitter is a great platform for that. Or, Elon Musk and leaders of business. Twitter is a great platform for that. Facebook.
Even if they don't follow you, they would see you.
Let me tell you a secret. This is no extra charge. Let me tell you a secret.
Yes.
Follow people you admire on Twitter. And when they say something profound, if they post something you really identify with or something to encourage you, I respond to them. Now, granted, they may have 1.5 million followers. They may not ever see me, but sometimes they do. I've had Rick Warren. Before I ever met Rick Warren, I responded to a post he did, and he's got like 2.5 million followers. And he responded back to me, which means on Twitter, when he responds back, all those 2.5 million followers can see my Twitter name. And so you get this bump in followers. So every once in a while, respond to somebody and they'll either retweet you or maybe they'll respond to you. And when they do, exposes your Twitter name to all their followers. So it's a great way to start engaging with a bigger crowd and starting to grow your followers. Not to mention, you may say something profound and they may want to start a relationship with you. You never know. I mean, I've met a lot of really interesting people just by reaching out and engaging them on a platform like Twitter. Facebook is a little more friends and family. That's, really from, family, kind of close friends stuff. And then Instagram is probably the fastest growing thing out there. Pinterest is growing quite quick too. But I just think Instagram is fun because we live in a visual generation and we like to share photos and we like to share videos. And so I think Instagram has just blown up and there's some really influential people that are on Instagram. And I think it's a real fun way to follow people. And you can do both things. You could post funny stuff like I do regularly, or you can post stuff that you experience. I occasionally will post things I've experienced with my grandkids or working on a film shoot, some behind the scenes things there. And so I just find the ones that you're most comfortable with and you enjoy and start focusing on them. Now,
you graduated from Oral Roberts University.
I did.
And then, but you wrote the book, How Christians, I'm going to get the title right.
The Last Evangelist, probably.
The Way Back, How Christians Blew Our Credibility and how do you balance that? Oral Roberts University and how Christian blew credibility.
Well, you know John Bach, my co-writer who wrote it with me from Grace Hill Media. And John and I had spent a lot of time sitting around, a fire pit talking about the direction culture is going. And, it used to be people ignored Christians. Now they openly ridicule us on the news and in comedy shows and on TV commercials. And the culture has gone in such a weird direction. And so the truth is we started looking, we thought maybe people don't understand how awesome we Christians are. Maybe that's the problem. And so we started writing the book and we started doing some research and we started looking at Lifeway, a number of different research organizations, Gallup and some others. And we wanted to understand people's perceptions of us and how Christians actually live our lives. So one of the things we discovered was that, Christians, we're terrible at being Christians. I mean, just when you look at statistics, and I'm not talking about just people who say they're Christians, but people who show up at church. Here's some things we found out. We found out that 45% of Christians who show up in church read the Bible once a month, rarely or never. As you probably know, less than 10% of Christians actually give 10% of their income to the work of God. We discovered that 63% of Christians think prayer is essential, and we thought, okay, that's a win. But then we realized the flip side of that means 37% of people in church today don't believe prayer is essential. And coming to church really was amazing. We found out that if you just show up 18 times a year, you're now considered a regular. The pastor's thrilled. 18 out of 52 times, you're in. And so what we discovered was, it's, you know, we first thought maybe it's bad marketing. We're not branding ourselves well. But then we realized it's not a marketing problem. The reason Christianity's lost its credibility in the culture is we have a sales force problem. It's like going to a meeting at Coke to discover everybody there is drinking Pepsi. We're not living the life God called us to live. And so that's what really sparked the book. And we wrote the book about how we need to shift. And we went back to the early church to see how they did it, because they just blew up. It was amazing how fast the early church was growing. And what did they do differently from us? And how did we go off the rails? And so I would encourage people to get it, because it really does help people understand why we've lost credibility. And it goes back to our original conversation that people are never going to want to experience Christianity if they don't want to be like us. But right now they look at us and they think hypocrite, and they're right. They think, you know, we don't live the life we're called to live. So of course we're a hypocrite, we're phony. And so they have no desire to be like us. So I think until we can get ourselves straightened out, we're not going to make much of an impact in the culture.
So, you know, sometimes, and this is, I've never shared this with anybody. Sometimes I feel as a comedian, the comedians are the gestures of the culture. And sometimes I feel like I need to go out and just, you know, like you see this pastor that's like with the big hair that's pushing like name it and claim it, you're going to be so wealthy. And I want to say something, but then I go, you know what? The whole culture is against Christianity. Why should I add to that? Or I'm going to lose a lot of Christians who don't want to hear some truth or some criticism. What do you take? How do you deal with that?
I totally understand. And I look at it a couple of different ways. Number one, if I'm talking to an exclusively Christian audience, I will get much more direct in what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to talk about. And I do love the fact that you are a comedian. You can address subjects that me or somebody else would be uncomfortable addressing. I mean, you're right. Historically, the role of the court jester has been to be funny, but doing it in a way that kind of stings, makes people think. And I think Jesus was brilliant at that. I did a talk recently on my podcast about confrontational creativity. I think, when was the last time you did something that was so creative, so brilliant, it made people angry? I look back at my career, and very often the most significant creative work I've done on television or in film or in other places, the client didn't like. I actually had arguments with the client about it, or it really turned off people. But then I realized it was hugely popular. It made a huge impact. So I think as Christians, we sometimes think we have to be nice all the time. But Jesus talked about, he wasn't there to bring peace. He was there to bring a sword. So Jesus was, you know, there are parts of the Bible that seem more like the Game of Thrones TV series than what you'd think would go in the Bible. And so I just think it's not a matter of making people angry intentionally. It's not a matter of being provocative. It's just a matter of confronting them with an uncomfortable truth, but doing it in a really creative way. I think you're quite brilliant at it, actually. And I think it's why people love to hear you, because you can cross those kind of lines, but with comedy, you can get away with it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that my son asked, and he's a director, and then you've done movies, and do you separate the art from the artist? Do you do that?
That's a good question. You know, that happens a lot in Hollywood, because suddenly we see somebody who makes amazing movies and find out he beats his wife, or he's, you know, run off from his kids, or he's an alcoholic or drug addict or something. And so it's very, you know, I learned early on that David Lean, who did movies I admired so much in my life, Bridge Over the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, those epic movies, was pretty much a jerk in his personal life. And I've seen that over and over here in town. So it's an interesting question. My answer for me is I try to live my life up to the same standards as I would use when I'm making a movie. I do think it costs when the world looks at something you've created and they've seen you be hypocritical, or they've seen you lie or cheat or steal or do something stupid, there's no question in my mind that the world suddenly will be more open to dismissing what you do. Certainly some people don't care. They want to see a great movie. They don't care who made it. But in my mind, character matters. It really does. And I think in order to, and here's the other thing with your son, he wants to have a long, continuous career in Hollywood. And that's where character really does matter. If you want to keep those relationships going, this is ultimately a relationship business. And you want the studios to fund your projects or TV networks. Character really, really does matter. And I find, even as a Christian, everybody in town knows I'm a Christian, but they don't care because they like what I do. They like the kind of work that I do. And so I think as long as you have integrity and character, that's going to get you through a lot of difficult places.
Okay. Now, how do you indulge, what do you call it? Involve the culture. Let's say you're a Christian leader or a pastor or stuff. How do you, involve your culture or get them attracted to your church now that we're trying to come back or get the people back? How do you do it as a Christian leader?
Well, I think, it's interesting that I think when you study the life of Jesus, it's funny. He, all of his sermons, all of his teachings dealt with real life things people were going through at that moment. He was completely in touch with people of his community. And I think today some pastors they teach from the Bible, which is great, but it has no connection to what people are actually going through at any given moment. So I'm not for feel-good theology. I'm not for shallow theology, but I do believe we need to tie in what we're teaching to people who are really struggling out there. One of the sayings we have here in Hollywood is brilliant at making fake things look real, but too many Christians are brilliant at making real things look fake.
Wow.
And I think that's a powerful word for pastors, especially, that we need to be very, very real, and we need to be on the front lines of what's going on. It's interesting. There are a lot of churches in Los Angeles, but if you talk to a non-believer at random on the street, the one they'll probably mention is the Dream Center here in LA, because Matthew Barnett is out there feeding people every day. They're talking about on social media. They're pulling in homeless people. They've got drug rehab programs, alcohol programs. They're helping homeless kids. I mean, they're doing stuff that makes an impact with people. So they're actually on the radar, even for people who aren't remotely Christians, because they see the amazing work they're doing. And I think far too many churches are pretty much invisible in their community, because other than having services on Sunday, they're not really doing much outreach to the community the rest of the week.
Good. If you're a pastor right now, would you rather open your church outdoors, or would you rather continue on Zoom or doing?
That's a great question. And I don't think there's a right answer to that. It goes either way. I know people like Andy Stanley who are going to stay closed until 2021, John MacArthur, Dudley Rutherford, Drew Sams here at Bel Air, and other churches who are starting to meet outdoors. I think there is a place for people to meet. I just think people love the fellowship. That idea is important. I do think we've learned a lot about online. We've learned that I think there are going to be a significant number of people that probably are going to cut back church 1 or 2 Sundays a month, I think, and they're going to stay at home and watch it online. And that's okay. We just have to understand to adapt the new realities. I've had a lot of pastors ask me, I've spent the last 6 months telling people how awesome online worship is. How am I ever going to get them to come back to the building? And it is a challenge. And I tell them, if it's only because of your preaching, they're not going to come back. Your church needs to have a huge program. You need to have all kind of outreaches and ministries for everybody in your family. And it needs to be a greater experience than just preaching and music on Sundays. So I totally get one of the, you'll identify with this as a comedian. What pastors are telling me is the thing they hate the most about live streaming is they don't get audience feedback. Like you don't hear people laugh. You don't hear, they don't get that. And so it's driving them nuts. And I think they want to get people back in the room so badly, simply to help get that feeling of feedback coming back from the audience. I'm sure you identify with that.
Yes. Now, I read your blogs and they're educational. I mean, everyone who's listening or watching, you need to go to Phil Cooke and read the blogs that he has. And one of the blogs that you did, you talked about Zoom, and there's a lot of people don't know much, how to use it correctly. Is there a couple pointers that you can give us about Zoom, how to do Zoom?
We live in a world where Zoom has become normal. And particularly if you're a leader out there of some kind and you're in business, or you're having business meetings on Zoom, or you're teaching on Zoom. A lot of teachers have come to me for advice. In fact, I spoke recently to a teachers convention on how to use Zoom more effectively. A couple of quick things would be, think about your lighting. So often I'll see people on Zoom that the back wall is lit and they're virtual silhouette. I mean, they're completely dark. So think about lighting. We want to see your face. And another thing is the framing of the picture. Look at the way the two of us are framed right now. This is pretty good framing here, but so many people, you know, they'll do the whole Zoom call down here in the corner, not paying attention, or, you know, they'll be way too close to people and it drives the other people nuts. So, you know, you really want your head to be in the top half or third of the frame. And you want to get in fairly close so people can see your emotions and your expressions. And also something funny you'll identify with, Nazareth, is I did a conference, an online conference a couple weeks ago, and the keynote speaker used his wife's computer. So the whole time his wife's name was on the screen where his name should have been. And, you know, Louise. And I'm thinking, you know, make sure you're in the right account and it's got your name on the screen, because that's really important. So little things like that can make a dramatic difference. Get into a place where it's not noisy, where the kids aren't running around, where the dogs are not barking. That stuff is so distracting. And here's the whole point. It's not about ego. It's about setting up your authority and your expertise in the area that you want to focus on in your career. And you want to be taken seriously. So by doing some of these wacky things on Zoom, people just don't take you very seriously. Some people are listening right now and thinking, it really doesn't matter. Nobody really cares. They do, because that perception of you lends toward their perception of you as a leader, as a thinker, as somebody they need to follow. So I'll tell you what, little things like that can really matter when you're in the online world.
You know, I did, it's funny, a couple of months ago, I did our church's senior group. I did it on Zoom. Some seniors are very good at Zoom. The others, one, you can only see the eye, one is the ear, one the left. It was like a puzzle. By the end of the Zoom, I was able to get one person and move the boxes around to make a...
Or else they stare at the other person on the computer, so that means you're only seeing the top of their head the whole time.
Exactly. Now, another selfish question. If you're just graduated as a movie director or in the industry, graduated, what kind of work can you get now with this whole pandemic where Hollywood is shut down?
Well, you know, I owned a commercial company for a number of years. We did Super Bowl commercials. We did a lot of big A-list commercials with major companies. And one of the things that was most interesting from that experience was that many of the directors we hired were directors who had never gotten paid for anything at all, but they had created a reel of some amazing commercials. And so, for instance, they had made a Nike commercial. It's a fake spot. Nike doesn't know anything about it, but they did a really cool, they just made it up themselves, paid for it themselves. They just made a really cool Nike commercial. Or they did a Ford commercial, or they did something else. And they put 4 or 5 of these commercials they did, we call them spec spots, they're speculative, put them on a reel, and suddenly they have a reel they can actually show people. In the directing world, in the commercial world, in the TV world, the film world, your work is more important than your resume. So no matter how great your resume may sound, people really want to see what you've done. So, and I encourage people, don't get a rock and roll song that you like and then put a whole bunch of scenes of all your student projects together. I want to see a whole story, and a commercial can be that, a little short film can be that. So the most important thing a young director can do is be out there filming, because you're constantly trying to build your reel. You're constantly trying to make it better, because that's ultimately what you'll get attention for. And you can send that reel, a link to your reel, to any producer in town, and they may not watch it, but their assistant might, or one of their team might, and you just never know who might return your call. So it's your work that ultimately gets you noticed. And so I'd encourage you, get out there, be filming. Even if you have to make it up and do it yourself, film it. And by the way, don't tell me you don't have a budget, because there's two film festivals in America just for movies made on iPhones. So even, you may not have access to a really nice camera. That's okay. Get out there and start shooting.
Question. There's people watching right now. They're leaders of Christian ministries, crisis pregnancy and stuff, and they want to know from Phil Cooke how to have a successful fundraiser now in this pandemic when you can't get the people in.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of those. We've been working with a lot of nonprofit organizations and ministry organizations, helping them move their fundraising event online, and it's a totally different world. You're not at the hotel ballroom anymore. You're not at the resort anymore. You don't have people trapped in a room around dinner tables. Now they're at home. They can get up and leave anytime they want. They could be eating a sandwich. You just never know what's going on. So you have to be really, really intentional about what you're trying to do. So I say, number one, keep it fairly short. Most of the ones we've done have been an hour, maybe an hour, 15 minutes. Whether you want to have some celebrities in there, great. People, it's easier to promote an event when there's some celebrities, but it's not necessary. We did a really successful online event for a major ministry recently, and they wanted to hear their people from around the world reporting in on the international work they were doing. So instead of a VIP or a celebrity, we had their own leadership team report in. So that's a good pathway to do it. I would keep individual segments short, maybe 3 to 5 minutes at the most. Keep it moving. And here's the other thing. Do the ask, what we call the call to action when you're encouraging people to give or donate. Do that various times throughout the entire experience. One thing we've learned, and this is true of live streaming church services as well, people tune in and out during the entire program. So if you wait till the end to ask for money, you've missed a ton of people that were watching early on and gave up for whatever reason. And if you ask at the beginning and not at the end, you'll miss people that tuned in late. So I always say, ask at the beginning, ask maybe a couple times in the program, and then ask at the end, because people are, think of your live stream, whether it's a church service or a fundraising event, as a stream, not a pond. It's not the same group of people sitting in that room for the entire hour and a half. It's usually people coming in and out at various times. So it's very important. I don't do an hour and a half fundraiser. I do a whole bunch of 10-minute fundraisers, because whenever people tune in, I want them to hear the message, know what we're doing, and have a chance to give. So I think if you can remember those things, it'll really help make a big difference in the kind of fundraising event that you do.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Okay. Towards the end, we're almost last 10 minutes. What can Cooke Media do to 3 different people? The first one, a mega church pastor right now watching. What can your company do for them?
We work with a lot of mega church pastors and a lot of mega churches for a number of different reasons. All of them have different expectations and different reasons they call us. Some is because the pastor maybe wants to branch out and have a speaking career or a media career outside the church. He wants to stay as pastor of the church, but he also wants to do teaching stuff and have a bigger career than that, maybe do publishing and things like that. Sometimes they want to go on television. Oddly enough, we've had 3 churches that we work with here in the U.S. that during the pandemic, during the church shutdown, they've actually gone on local television. So we helped them with their live stream, and it turned out to be so effective and so good. They said, hey, we want to show this to the community. So they started editing their live stream down to 30 minutes every week and doing a version of that on local television stations and showing people what's happening at their church. So it's a lot of different reasons. People sometimes, sadly, people come to us for a crisis. Sometimes somebody's run off with the money or the secretary or something has gone wrong at a church, and people will call us about how do we handle the reporters? How do we handle the press? Do we release a statement? So there's a lot of reasons different churches will call us. And even with big mega churches that have a media team, there's a number of ways we can help take them to the next level too.
What about a pastor of a medium church, medium size,
Pastor of a medium-sized church, we live in a media-driven culture. And so that's a great sweet spot for using social media, online media. I'll tell you a little secret tip, and that is, I believe your website, your church website, should be 100% focused on new visitors. I mean, think about it. Your church members know who the pastor is. They know what the church is. They know where it's located. They know when the Christmas pageant's going to be. Your church members never go to your website. So your website should be completely redesigned for new visitors. Everything they need to know. I'll tell you this, virtually 100% of new visitors will check you out online before they visit. So which means if that website is the thing that tilts them over to make the decision to come, in some ways your website should probably be the best thing you do. So I'm a big believer that medium-sized churches can use media really, really effectively, particularly in the local community, to connect with people.
Now, what about a smaller church, 200 members or less? They're going to...
Smaller churches have more of a struggle. However, I did a teaching. There's a church network out there called ARC Churches, Association of Related Churches, ARC. And I did a teaching, a Zoom teaching just a week or two ago for 50 of their church planters who are planting churches 100% online right now. So they wanted to know some techniques about how they can do that. So even if you have 5 people or 10 people, there's some techniques for using social media, for using live streaming that you can use to really start growing the church. One tip I always give pastors, and I don't understand why more don't do this. And if I was a pastor, every single Sunday I'd get up in the pulpit and say, hey, if this church means something to you, if you've enjoyed the services, go out there and talk about it on social media. Tell your friends on Facebook about the church. Tell them on Twitter and on Instagram. Just share about what God's done in your life at this church. And that's just an exponential way to get more and more people talking about your church. And that can have a huge impact on what you do.
All right. That's awesome. And how can they get a hold of Cooke Media?
You can find out everything about me at philcooke.com, philcooke.com. I'm Cooke with an E. And so if you go there, you can pretty much reach everything. My books are there. My podcasts are there. I blog almost every day. And you can find out about my new book that you mentioned, Maximize Your Influence, yes, and go from there.
What are you working on right now?
I am just getting ready to do a big online gala event, fundraising event for the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. We're in the very early stages of writing that. It'll actually happen in November. So we're going to be shooting and filming a bunch of segments and people for that. We're working really hard on that. I've got another book in the works that I'm doing, even though I'm just releasing this one. I've got another one I'm starting. And so I just think that, I mean, God's been really, really good. We've got some amazing clients that we work with, some churches and ministry organizations around the country that are doing some really remarkable things, and keeping up with them and helping them get their message out there is one of the great things that we do. So by the grace of God, we've stayed very, very busy.
Perfect. Last minute question, which is, there's some comedians and speakers, performers watching right now. How do you encourage them in this time, or what do you tell them to how to help them out right now in this pandemic? What should they be doing?
You know, it's interesting. When this pandemic started, when the shutdown happened, I thought we were out of business. I just thought our team, we have a small team of about 7 or 8 people, and I just thought we're out of business, and this is going to be really tough. But then I had this idea of just planting seeds. And so I started this teaching online on Zoom for pastors. I taught 200 pastors in Russia about how to upgrade their live stream. I taught 60 pastors, Portuguese-speaking pastors in Portugal and Brazil. I taught a session in South America. I've been teaching in India, all online, all for free, and a number of denominational groups in the U.S. And I just wanted to put that out there for people to try to help them. And so by planting that seed, suddenly a lot of these churches start calling us and say, you know what? I love that advice. What can you do to help us go to the next level in what we're doing? And so we actually started to get hired even during the shutdown by churches, simply because I was putting the word out there for free. So I'll just encourage creative people, whether you're writers or comedians or whatever, performers of any kind, get out there in front of people, get out there, try to work out, Facebook. As soon as you go live on Facebook, they send notifications to everybody. Same with Instagram. You can just start conversations. And I even tell pastors, that Sunday live stream is only the beginning. You need to keep connecting with people during the week. And I think by doing a great example is this podcast that you're doing right now. I think just by connecting people, you're not getting paid for this. You're planting this as a seed out there. And by connecting with people and getting viewers, it's going to come back to you. So I just encourage people, trust God, go out there, plant a seed, and contribute. And I think those things will eventually come back.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know your dad was a pastor. You went to Oral Robertson. There's some people who are listening right now. They go, okay, I'm scared. I'm anxious. I'm fearful about the future of our nation. What's going on? Can you, as a son of a pastor or someone who I know your faith is very strong, what do you tell these people to encourage them as we close?
Well, you know what? It is tough. We found out a few weeks ago that when the court ruled against that Nevada church who was trying to open, it's okay for casinos to be open and packed, but we can't have a local church open. And so that told me that we do truly live in a secular culture. We've lived off the fumes of Christian culture for the last 50 to 100 years. but we really do live in a secular culture. And I think we have to understand as Christians, particularly as Christian leaders, how to navigate that. And we kind of need to earn our place at the table every single day. Just because we're preaching the gospel, just because we're Christians, doesn't mean anybody's going to listen to us. And so my encouragement to you is stay in the fight, stay out there. In fact, get your story. I tell church pastors all the time, even right now, I get that it's really difficult to take up an offering on your live stream. But I've discovered that if you're in the fight, if you're out there making an impact in your community during this COVID problem, talk about it. And when people see that your church is doing something, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So they're more likely to give if you cast a great vision for them. So I just say, get out there, tell the story. God's called you to do something significant with your life. So this could be your greatest moment. And let me say this is also a great moment for change. The last 6 months, people have been hammered that, things are not going to be the same. There's a new normal. Change is happening. So, most people hate change, but right now they've had it hammered into their head so much that whatever it is you want to change about your life, your career, the vision for your church or your organization or your business, this is the moment to do it, because people are much more open to change than they probably will ever be again in our lifetime. So this is the time to start thinking about creative ideas and how they can impact your future.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for what you do. You made the kingdom a lot more hipper and a lot more professional with your
Well,
work.
I'm just trying to keep up with you. That's all it is. Just trying to keep up with you.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I knew you're a very, very busy man. I want to encourage everyone, read everything that this man does, from blogs, from his Instagram, his Twitter. Just get it all sinking. The thing I came out with right now, louder than ever: lead with your talent, and then your faith. Follow with your faith. Love you. Thank you so much, Phil. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for taking the time. God bless.